We are going to show you how to write August in different calligraphy styles. I'm Jillian. I'll show you how to do faux calligraphy, brush pen calligraphy, bounce lettering, and iPad calligraphy.
And I'm Jordan, and I'm going to be using a pointed pen, and I'll show you how to write August in Copperplate and Spencerian, and also how to do some flourishing.
Let's get started with faux calligraphy.
So if you're not familiar with faux calligraphy, this is what it looks like. We're going to be drawing the outlines of the letters to make it look like calligraphy, and then at the end you could color in those gaps to make it look like you wrote it with a calligraphy pen. So this is great because you can use any pen for this. So for August, we're going to start with a very basic style of the letters, and then I'll show you how to add a little bit of style later on. Okay, so for the capital A, we're going to make this kind of style. So first what we're going to do is write the whole word in monoline, then we'll go back in and add the shades. Okay. Then we're going to move on to the U. The U has two underturns, so this is called an underturn. And then we'll do another underturn that's going to end a little shorter because we're going into an oval shape next. So let's do the oval for the G. Next, we're going to do the descending loop. So I like to start this a little bit farther away from where that oval shape is and then come down with a straight line that turns into a teardrop shape, and it's going to end. We'll lift our pen before we cross through that. I'm using marker paper on top of guidelines so that I can see through the paper to the guidelines underneath. The letters are resting on the baseline, and the space between the baseline and this first line here is called our X height. Okay, I'm going to start the entrance stroke of the next letter U a small distance away from the stem of the G, right at the baseline. You'll see why in a minute. We're going to go into the U. So this is an entrance stroke, then we'll have an underturn and another underturn. Now we always have to be thinking ahead to what the next letter is, because if we're going into a letter that has a curve, an oval like the G, you need to end this stroke lower so that it matches up here. But we're actually going into an S, and the S is going to extend a little bit above our X height. So as I finish the U underturn, I'm going to bring the end of it just up along the diagonal lines. If you're using calligraphy guide sheets, there are lines that are diagonal. These are called slant lines, and this is just to help keep our letters consistent along that angle. Okay, so then after we do that shape, we're going to make a little loop at the top. It's going to end at the top of the X height there. And then for this version of the S, we're going to make a shape that kind of starts off as like a backwards C shape, curves back in towards the entrance of the S. We can finish this off with an exit stroke, and then we'll do the T. So the T is going to start up here, straight down following that slant angle, curves at the bottom, and this bottom shape is an underturn. Definitely check out our basic strokes video tutorial if you are unfamiliar with the basic strokes. Now we're going to add the shades so that we can make the outlines of the letters. Now the shades go on a specific part of the letter. They'll always go on your down strokes, anywhere that your pen comes down. We also want to keep them on the inside of any curves, and we want to keep them consistent in width so that all of these spaces within your letters are as even as possible with each other. So for the A, we came, just to do this oval here, we came down at this point and started coming back up. So we're going to add that shade line here. Always end your curve right at or before it hits the baseline. You don't want to overshade it. And then since this part is an upstroke, we're going to leave it alone. We're only adding this to the downstrokes. So we had to kind of taper this at the top and the bottom to follow that curve. This part we can start by drawing a straight line out to the right to show how thick this line is going to be, or the outline. Then follow it down as parallel as you can, tapering as you reach the bottom of that curve. The next two strokes are almost the same thing, they're just a little shorter. So you're going to start with a line out and to the right, follow it down till you hit the curve. Sometimes I find that drawing these lines a little faster makes them less shaky, because if you're going really slowly, sometimes, at least for me, it gets a little bit shaky. Okay, the G oval we have very similar to this one, where it's the inside of the curve. Inside meaning, like, if this is my oval, this is outside of the oval and this is inside. So we're going to do the shade on the inside. Unless for some reason you accidentally made your oval really narrow, you can use the shade to correct it a little bit. It kind of depends on the context. This part of the G, we're going to make a line out and to the right to show the width of it, and ideally it's going to fill in the space here that you left for the entrance stroke of the U. And just go ahead and taper that as you reach the bottom of the descending loop. And then we have another U. So this word actually has a lot of these underturns here in the U's, and then even the T is just a taller version of that underturn. So a line out to the right, follow it down, taper as you reach the curve, making sure you're not overshading it. So if this is your underturn, overshading would look like following that curve too far. You just want to end it down as you reach the baseline. Okay, for this S, this part came down, so this is our downstroke, and we're going to do it on the inside of the curve, so don't do it on this edge, do it on the inside edge. And lastly, for the T, it'll look just like your other underturns. And the reason that I didn't do the crossbar yet is so that as I make the crossbar, I can lift my pen up and not draw a line straight through it. So that's the same reason we left this area open, is so that we don't have a line crossing through an open spot. So this is if you want to leave these gaps open, which is what I'm going to do. But of course you could go and color in all of those gaps with your pen very carefully to make it look like you wrote it with a calligraphy pen, which I'm going to show you next. So this pen is a brush pen, and you can use brush pens for calligraphy. This is a small tip brush pen that I'm going to rewrite this word using this pen, and it's going to look very similar. So the way a brush pen works is as you press harder on the pen, you can get a thick stroke, and as you press lighter on the pen, you can get a thin stroke, so that as you do your letters, you're adding those shades automatically as you go. So I'm going to rewrite the word in the exact same style using this tool with my baseline here. So I'm going to start with this large oval for the A, the capital A. This is just a very basic version of the capital A. We'll show you some fancier versions later on. And I'm still lifting my pen after each and every stroke that I draw. So I'm pressing hard for these thick strokes and lighter for the thin strokes. Still going to lift my pen after this descending loop so that I can reposition it for the entrance stroke of the U. Going nice and slowly and thinking ahead to whatever my next letter is going to be. So instead of drawing a loop here, I'm just going to do a small shade at the top of the S, and then I can finish it off with that curve, exit the S, and finish off with the T. So that's how I would write this with a brush pen. For bounce lettering, we're going to take certain parts of the letters and change them up to make them look a little more modern and bounce some parts below the baseline. So I'm going to actually start off my A the same way as I did before, but this piece, instead of bringing the bottom of it down level with the bottom of the oval, I'm actually going to make it come a little bit lower. I'm also making my letters slightly more rounded. And here I'm going to pick certain parts of the letters to change up. So the first part of the U is the same as before, but the second part you can see is dipping down below the baseline, similar to that piece. Okay, the G oval will be a little more rounded, and then I always like to add a simple little flourish on my descending loops for bounce lettering. I just feel like it makes it look cute. Then this U will be similar to this one where I dip it below. I'm going to completely change up the S. Instead of using this more traditional style of the S, I'm just going to make a more modern version. And the T will kind of curve back into itself and cross with a wavy crossbar. So that's one way that you could do bounce lettering. It's not the only way. There are different parts of the letters that you can change up to make it look a little bit bouncier. If I were to redo this, I would probably actually start my T crossbar more like here, because it looks like it's getting too close to the U, so maybe I would move it up and start it here instead. There's always something that you can improve. Now I'm going to demonstrate iPad calligraphy. This is an app called Procreate, and I'm holding an Apple Pencil to write with. And this brush is one that we've designed to look like a brush pen, where if you press hard, you get a thick stroke, and if you press lightly, you get a thin stroke. You can also see it's changing color. So I love using the iPad for practicing and doing calligraphy, because if you do something and if you make a mistake as you're going, let's say you make a stroke and you want to redo it, you can tap with 2 fingers on the screen to undo, and then you can try again. So that makes it easy if you make a mistake and you want to fix it. But I'm going to do a little bit of a different style here using my iPad. So for the word August, I am doing a little bit more of a modern style than traditional, you can see a little bit of bounce is happening here. I like doing a modern style because this is a modern tool, but it's pretty fun to see people who do a traditional style on the iPad, because it's kind of mixing old and new. So this is another way that you could write the word August, and the tool being the iPad, but you could also take this style and incorporate it into your faux calligraphy or brush pen calligraphy. Now next up, Jordan is going to show you a more traditional style and tool.
I'm going to show you how to write August with a pointed pen calligraphy in the Copperplate style. The first stroke of this word is usually written in an upward direction, but I personally sometimes have trouble with this stroke, and let me just try it once. And if this doesn't turn out well, I'll show you a little trick for a different way you can do it. Okay, so that actually turned out pretty well, but if you struggle with making an upward stroke that's that thin and that long, you could just make it in the downward direction and keep it thin. The next stroke will start right here and then taper into a thick line as we reach the baseline. Then we're going to make the crossbar of the A this slanted oval shape, and then continue through to connect to the U. And the U is just 2 underturns next to each other. I'm dipping my pen in ink off to the side anytime I feel like I'm about to run out. Okay, then the G starts with an oval and then a descending stem loop. Just a little bit of self-critique on that letter form. My descending stem loop covered up a little bit too much of that side of the oval. Also, it looks a little bit too short. So let me just try another G over here just to show you what I would aim for next time I make this letter. Okay, so my stem wasn't that much longer, but you can see the amount of overlap on the side of the oval is a lot less in this version versus in this version, but we'll just keep going here. Next we have another U, which is another set of 2 underturns next to each other. For the S, I go up a little bit above the header line and then make the right side of an oval with shading. You can add a little dot right there. And then finally, the T is an underturn that starts up higher. So I'm starting right here. You can see the printed slant lines that are under my marker paper right here. All I'm doing is tracing over the slant line with that downstroke to make it at the same slant. And then for the crossbar, crossing through like this. Now let's write another version of August, but this time we're going to flourish it. And this is going to be based on the Copperplate style. So before I told you could make this first stroke coming in the downward direction. Normally it's thin, but when I make a flourished version, I'm actually going to add a little bit of thickness and come in the downward direction. And then I'm going to bring this outside, spiral around like this. We're going to add a lot of embellishment to this letter. Okay, then I'm going to come this way and form kind of a little loop at the top, add shade as I come down, and dip below the baseline. And I'm going to make a wavy crossbar that starts right here in between these 2 shades and then crosses through. Okay, now I'm going to continue on. The next letter that I'm going to add a flourish to is the descending loop of the G. So the U is the same. The oval of the G is the same as that basic version. But for the G, I'm going to make the stem and then I'm going to come around and just make a really nice big flourish. Okay, so you might have seen 2 calligrapher nightmares just happen just now, one of which I'm touching up right now, where my ink started running out, so I'm just going to lightly fill it in with what's left on my pen. You probably also saw this splatter happen over here. I just want to take a second to remind you that calligraphy takes time and practice, and no one is perfect. So don't let that hold you back. If you make a splatter on the page, just keep trying. Okay, the U and the S are going to be like normal. The stem of the T is going to be normal. And then to finish off the top of this, I'm going to make a crossbar with a loop on the end. I switched to a Spencerian guide sheet underneath my marker paper, and now we're going to write August in Spencerian with a pointed pen. The capital A in Spencerian kind of looks like the style of a lowercase a. Also, Spencerian has a lot less shading than Copperplate. There's only a couple spots in the letters where you add shading, like the top part of this T, the main shade of the A, and then you can shade this part of the G or the bottom loop of the G. And now let's try some flourished Spencerian. So I'm going to start the A by making a large horizontal oval and then going into the letter form. I'm also going to finish with a horizontal oval over here, and that last oval is kind of wrapping around that U right there. And then I'm going to write the rest of the letters just normally, and then I'm going to flourish the T. So first I'm making the stem of the T. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the end of the stem and I'm going to go around the top of the stem of the T, cross through it, and then come back through. So I'm going to cross the T with a flourish, and the flourish comes off of the end of the T. So around and through, and then finish with an oval shape. I decided to add a little bit of shading right there. And that's how you write August in Spencerian and flourished Spencerian.
Thanks so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed this tutorial. You can find some free calligraphy resources in the description below the video.
Let us know which style was your favorite in the comments, and then hit subscribe for more calligraphy videos.